What about now?
Oh, there we go. That's
That's
it.
what I'm talking about.
Yeah, 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 yeah.
Ben,
Hey.
it's been a while.
Yeah. What? I don't even know last time we spoke. I know it was with James Lindsay,
Mm-hmm.
but that must have been sometime last year.
Yeah, yeah, I would assume so.
Yeah. What's been going on? I saw that you released another episode or
I did.
video. Yeah.
Yep, yep. I released the last Science Wars episode, and then I released more recently a video response to a bread tuber named Zoe B concerning epistemology
Yeah.
and some silly views about race.
Yeah. You ended that one in polemic, high polemic style.
The consequence of believing that knowledge claims are fundamentally just the expression of biases produces a state of affairs in which no knowledge claims have any objective advantage over their rivals. And in such a world, whether or not the Holocaust happened is, ultimately, just a matter of personal preference. This is unacceptable. As is my tendency. I like to have a kind of rhetorical crescendo.
Yeah.
Start off, mild and easy, but crank it up to 11 so that at the end of it, yeah, you know how it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's an artistic choice.
No, yeah. I mean, it works on YouTube, probably works in the bedroom too. What have you been pondering lately?
I've been pondering the necessity of developing parallel social institutions and to accelerate what I think is inevitably going to be a kind of divorce of the two Americas.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So, accelerationism.
No, I'm not an accelerationist.
Okay.
Yeah, I probably shouldn't have used the word acceleration.
Okay. So,
Please, nobody go out and shoot people on my behalf. That's not what I'm saying.
or redouble your efforts to release the next Skynet update or anything like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
No, 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 no.
So, what are these two Americas then?
Well, it's become increasingly obvious to me that we're witnessing the development of two distinct American ethnicities, and they're broadly aligned along the axis of, well, Jonathan Haidt would call it the fairness value, or he would identify it as the fairness value. We fundamentally disagree as to what this word means.
Mm.
And, one America, which I'll call the proportionists. And by the way, before anyone loses their shit, this has nothing to do with, the racial distribution or anything. These are both going to be multiracial in their composition.
Yeah. You specifically said ethnic.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Which I distinguish from race. But yeah. So you have what I call the proportionists, and as the name implies, what you give is what you get. Um, and in contrast to the proportionists, you have the equalists, which is everybody gets the same. These are both extremes. Obviously, there are a range of positions that you can hold. You can be a proportionist and believe in a social safety net. You can be an equalist and believe that people don't necessarily have to be paid the same income for different jobs. But broadly speaking, if you take a kind of low resolution view of these of American ideologies, people seem to fall into kind of one camp or the other.
And they are in tension, to put it mildly.
Yeah, yeah. My expectation is there's going to be a break, and I think that proportionists need to be very busy in the process of developing cultural institutions that will be able to embody the kinds of values that they're interested in propagating to future generations.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. There is a right-left split or Democrat-Republican split just because of the way that our politics is set up. And you see that under the Republican banner, there is a kind of a alliance of different points of view. You have the evangelicals, you have kind of the neocons, you have the libertarians, and they're kind of all gathering together. And then there's MAGA, which seems to be kind of a broad umbrella itself, if you look at it closely. And they seem to be a little bit more cohesive than the left. It seems to be the case that the left is, there's a big tension between the hard left and then the neoliberal left. And it seems like the neoliberal left has been relying on the far left for voter turnout by promising them a bunch of stuff and then failing to deliver over and over and over again.
Yeah, but that's kind of the story of the left in America. You know, I'm taking the view that the hard left are and always have been just a mechanism to scare the shit out of the right, in order for neoliberals to get their way.
Okay,
it's like, okay, we're gonna keep these radicals at bay. We're gonna compromise with you as long as you kind of move politics in our direction. And the trouble is, the right didn't really have, never really has had anything like that. You know, the left can threaten you with communists, say, hey, you know, they're not one of us, but you know, we're not going to stop them if you don't give us what we want. We're gonna let them, you know, riot. We're gonna let them. We're going to let them screw with the country. But the right, you know, they can't just, hey, look, here's our neo-Nazis. We're gonna let them go on the loose, right? There's and you know, I'm not endorsing that. I'm just saying the nature of this is how the dynamic has been.
Mm-hmm.
There's
the left or the left-ish or the neoliberals trot out the scaries on the right, so they're using fear tactics on both sides to secure base. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's that political situation, which is very evident, but you're saying that there's a moral foundation at work around proportionality and equality or equity. Yeah. And that map.
Maybe I should call them the equitists instead of the equalists.
Equitocracy. Yeah. Versus meritocracy, perhaps. I don't know. Plenty of wordplay.
Yeah, you're better at this than I am. I'm a lowly scientist.
But you bring the data. So how does the left-right dichotomy that is prevalent on the national stage, how does that translate into this two ethnic or moral groups that are kind of coalescing?
I don't think it does cleanly. Okay. You know, obviously, you know, in terms of proportions, you're going to have a greater degree of people on the right, you know, people who are Republicans. They're going to be proportionists. And, you know, the contrapositive holds true for people on the left. But it's I would probably, you know, just pulling it out of my butt. I would say it's going to be a Pareto distribution, 80-20. So 80-20 on both sides.
But when the tension, if we do a little bit of fortune telling, if or when the tension between these two moral frameworks grows so extreme that it does start to dissolve or break apart the actual country. As in future tense. How is that going to shake out in the political arena? Or how has it? How will it? How does it shake out in the political arena? And how do we get people, or how do you think people need to be coached in order to see things as moral rather than a political split?
Well, I don't know that the two are necessarily distinct from each other. If by political you mean party, I would say people need to stop being attached to symbols. I feel like it's a bit of a separate kind of direction than kind of what I want to head towards, though.
Okay.
Which is kind of elaborating on a little bit more of how I'm seeing this play out, especially in my native California, where everyone is leaving.
Okay.
You know, this is just not sustainable. we can't keep living like this. Um,
So
and
let's take California as an example. How is the last 20 years? How has this played out in the last 20 years, or 15 or 10 years? Just tell the story of California, and then we can extrapolate on that to America at large.
Well, honestly, I couldn't tell you the story of California in great detail, other than to say that there has been an increasing concentration of wealth in parts of the state that are ironically very interested in equalizing the distribution of wealth, at least on paper.
Mm-hmm.
Where are the poor people in San Francisco? Well, we know where they are. They're on the street, yeah.
Yeah.
And geez,
And
a thousand thoughts are coming to my mind at once, and I don't even know the order.
It's very visible. It's very visible. And there's got to be people in the middle between the higher ups and the lower downs that are saying, this sucks. This is not sustainable. And they are leaving. And are they taking their politics with them? I guess it's going to be the question of Texas and Florida, right?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of disillusionment with California and California politics, and I don't think by and large people want to bring California with them. At least not to varying degrees. They're going to bring bits and pieces of California with them, and you can start to see a bit of a slide in that direction, and maybe intergenerationally it escalates, but it's not a problem for the people fleeing right now. Okay. Like my parents, to give an example, they came to this country from the former Soviet Union in the 1990s. My grandfather spent his whole life as an engineer. And when he first came to America, he started out as basically a cab driver, and he loved it. He never worked, so, well, it's not like it wasn't hard work. It was, but, relative to what he was doing, it was fairly relaxing. He got to chill. He got to talk to people. And he had never made that much money in his life. And, my family did bring a little bit of, I want to say, Soviet idealism with them to the States. My father does comment, back in the Soviet Union, we never had homeless. Whenever he sees like homeless encampments, it's like, yeah, but where did the government put them? What was the trade-off? I always want to quote to him Thomas Sowell's immortal quote: "There are no solutions; there are only trade-offs."
Yeah. So I did not know that you were your parents were immigrants. That's got to really color your view. So I'm wondering, they come over here, they do bring some of their idealism, as you put it, and they come here in the 90s, and over the last 30, 40 years, they've seen, I guess, if they're in California, but they've seen America change. And how are they responding to the changes in America?
Oh, they're depressed as hell. They're like, we left this shit, when we fled the Soviet Union. They're telling me, it sucks that you're probably going to end up having to do the same. They don't think the country is going to survive.
Oh, geez. Yeah. Okay. So, and what do they see? What is this shit? Just to make it really obvious to them.
Well, right now they're complaining a lot about gas prices, as is everybody else. Mm-hmm. But, in particular, my family was lifted out of poverty through capitalism. Back in 1994, there was an earthquake that happened in Southern California, and there were a lot of properties that were damaged. And one of these properties, because it was damaged so much, it was an apartment complex. My family was able to pool kind of what meager resources they had to put a down payment on this broken and damaged ass building. And over the years, over the decades, it's accrued enough wealth to lift us out of poverty and into the middle class. And I can already hear assholes talking about doing landlord memes. I wish like much of my childhood was spent basically renovating these units to increase their value and therefore increase the amount of rent that we would be able to take. and I developed a lot of like handy skills. You know, after school, I would like help install like plugs or plug holes. I would help install like pipes and shit. Like I was working with very basic circuits when I was like 10. I was basically assisting my dad in construction work, and to all the I'm growing accustomed to using this word, to all the shit libs who are talking shit about landlords. They just don't know what the fuck they're talking about when they say landlords don't do any work.
It's really interesting to see. I know it's just Reddit, and Reddit is what it is, but just to see this anti-work kind of movement going on and this anti-landlord movement going on, and I know that there are tyrannical capitalists. There are people who take your money and don't renovate the apartment, let's say. But being against work and being against landlords is basically being against private property and meritocracy. I guess that kind of the shit lib, what you call the shit lib, is kind of the forward guard of the equitists or the equity party.
Yeah, and these people, I don't know if they realize it or not, but they're being extremely pro corporation. They're being, well, I guess in that sense, it kind of makes sense. But when they imposed the eviction moratorium, small business owners, small landlords like my dad, like my family, we had a really difficult time, sustaining the cash flow, because even though the people who are renting the apartments are not paying rent, we still have to pay mortgage on the property. We still have to make repairs. We still have to make sure that all of the regulations are being, and who are the only people who can afford to do this realistically? Who's the only game in town?
Vanguard.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's all of the big companies that went in and bought up all these properties, and now that they have what is effectively a monopoly, they can do whatever the hell they want.
And the government, in order to save us from a pathogen, caused that to happen.
Yeah. So, I don't, this is me putting my cards on the table. I don't have any time for the anti-landlord type of people.
Well, yeah, but still your experience, I mean, your background, your ethnicity, coming from the communist country to America, you're watching your parents bust ass, you busting ass yourself, instilled in you some, a relationship to reality that's different than, I would suppose, the iPhone wielding, anti-corporate on the surface, but, Starbucks slurping kind of shit lib type who seems to be insulated from work. I don't see how you can be anti-work unless you have an imaginary relationship to reality where you think it can just be taken care of, where the system can just run itself. It seems like a lot of faith in the system, and I think that maybe, or how do I phrase this as a question? What do you think about the relationship between the equitrists and centralized government or corporations, or that monopoly on power and the bureaucracy, and how that is going to control how things play out?
Of course, you need managers and administrators in order for them to realize their vision. But what a lot of them don't seem to understand, or seem willfully blind to, perhaps because it serves their careerist purposes, is that this incentivizes the generation of self-licking ice cream cones. The creation of managerial and administrative bodies that oversee the realization of their programs and the types of things that they want to see done. These things exist principally for the purpose of propagating themselves and for acquiring, engaging in what I call bureaucratic metastasis. I talked before about wokeness as cancer, as an undifferentiated tumor that seeps into all aspects of society and turns everything to wokeness. Well, this is the metastatic aspect of it. This is the part of it. This is the mechanism by which it expands uncontrollably and rids the society of all of the various institutional functions that are needed to sustain a society.
So wokeness and non-efficient bureaucracy go hand in hand. They are the same thing, or they feed on each other. They facilitate each other.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I don't believe woke folk understand administration or management, or they don't understand what it means to be a leader.
Oh, okay. Well, that's different than bureaucracy. One amazing thing
Well,
about
that as well.
Biden and the Evergreen State College, which I just see is kind of the program of the Democratic Party, is that you had this leader at the Evergreen State College, George Bridges, who seemed like he was completely spineless, but it was that he just conformed to the power in the room. So he was always subservient to the power of the room, and then he would just transform power into more bureaucracy. That's all he ever did, while the college tanked because he didn't have that spine. He wasn't a leader, he was a bureaucrat. And there was a crisis in his leadership that displayed the weakness of his style, or that entire rubric style of managing crisis and leading and actually performing the goal of the institution, which is to learn. They changed the goal of the institution from learning to serving the students with a degree and then an experience. I see that,
I'll let
same
you in on a
pattern.
little. I'll let you in on a little
The
secret.
Bible.
Then that's all universities today.
Yeah.
I've seen this in play. I've worked at universities. I've taught courses. I've been into administrative meetings, and just to give you an example, without doxing myself, without talking about where I taught or what I did. Before the pandemic, there was already a transition to online learning in the form of labs, and one of the labs that gets taught is one of the, I don't want to say few things in college that you can go to pick up like valuable skills, but it's, relative to like certain departments, it's one of the few places you can go where you can go to college and you can take something tangible out of it. You can increase your value, not just as a worker, but as a person who has a set of skills that it's a circuits class. It's a class that teaches you the physics of circuits and how to work with them. And basically, by the time you're done with the class, if you've done well, you're never going to need to call an electrician again.
And that was transferred to remote.
Right. That was transferred to remote, which was its own shit show. But the goal was the incentives to phase out proper hands-on learning were already there. There were already plans in place to create modules, to create online modules that students would pay for. And this would basically show them somebody else or some animation of a circuit, right? Instead of, it's one thing to know how to read a map. It's another thing entirely to apply that map to a certain territory and navigate that territory.
Yeah.
And this kind of disconnect is going to rob you of the practical skills of being able to actually build circuits and test them and understand the experimental process. Shit doesn't always work out the way the theory necessarily says that it should, and you have to be able to troubleshoot. Like if something is wrong, you have to know, oh, is my resistor just broken, or have I turned something the wrong way? Have I placed the electrode in the wrong place? Have I I don't know, is the polarity wrong? Is that why I'm getting negative signs on my multimeter? And these kinds of skills are really, I want to say, almost impossible to translate into a digital module. So certainly, I didn't see any evidence of it being, being available. You don't learn troubleshooting skills, which are kind of, essential if you want to be able to have any practical skills. You have to know how to diagnose the problem when shit goes wrong, because shit inevitably goes wrong. Mm-hmm. And this was something that the administration was perfectly happy to sacrifice because it meant they wouldn't have to pay anyone to instruct these courses anymore. Mm-hmm. They could just sell these packages to the students.
Yeah. But why? It seems like they're phasing themselves out, because why would a student go to college when they can just go to YouTube? If the college isn't giving them anything,
because YouTube doesn't give credentials. The universities, the universities have essentially a monopoly over credentialing.
Yeah, but for practical skills, you don't need credentials as much as you do for, I'm a doctor of leotard or something like that, right? These
Okay.
hands-on things
Well,
necessarily need to be practically proven rather than.
well, tell that to people who are hiring in a labor market that is saturated with people who have degrees.
Okay. Yeah. Well, the degree was supposed to be a filtering mechanism for expertise, but the colleges
Right.
aren't about expertise anymore. They're about
No.
cost cutting and providing a service or education as a service kind of
Yeah,
thing.
they're about lowering standards to admit as large a student body as possible,
Yeah.
in order to extract as much capital from them as possible,
Yeah.
and pretend that the alternative is going to McDonald's. Well, these days, your options are work at McDonald's or get a degree and then work at McDonald's, depending on the degree, of course.
Well, and the labor market will eventually adapt to the fact that the college isn't actually signing off on expertise, and then the labor market will probably just import people of expertise from other countries whose certification is still tied to expertise. I imagine, and I know that that's playing out, at least
Yeah.
with certain areas of the government, are actually having to outsource the creation of very intense infrastructure to people of the Indian or the subcontinent, Southeast Asia, etc.
Yeah, it's true.
So this equitocratic or this equity-based morality, it seems, has the corner on all of our major institutions. And you've covered that, I've covered that, my audience, your audience, we both know that. But when we go outside of that and we start to look around for where other ideas are starting to come together, other values and connections of people with similar values that, as you say, are the proportionists, rather than the distributists. How do you see that, or where do you see that beginning to take place? Like this alternative, or yeah.
Right. Yeah. So the development of alternative institutions, these are institutions that have to embody from the outset the kinds of values that proportionists are interested in propagating to future generations. So family, nation, and if we must, God, whatever's. Yeah, I know you like that. You like the sound of that, but whatever allows us to propagate those values, which allow a civilization to function and thrive, without being torn apart by this kind of woke cancer. And how exactly this plays out, what specific institutions. You're going to chuckle, but probably for personal reasons lately, because I'm getting a bit out of shape. I've been working my ass off these past few months, and I need to go to the gym more. But I've been thinking about creating a kind of fitness organization. Not me personally; somebody else creates it. I'm busy, but someone creates kind of like a counter progressive gym, and it's something that local communities of disaffected individuals and individuals who are interested in forming communities and families that propagate these kinds of values can get involved in. And it's, working out, playing sports, doing that. It would be kind of a YMCA that isn't woke, and that
it's not necessarily anti-woke either. It's just non-woke, and it's focused on the positive values of building up yourself, mastering something.
Right. But, it would kind of be understood by the membership and by the leadership that you're not going to be pressured into wokeness when inevitably, the journalists and the hit pieces start talking about this kind of fascistic fight club that's cropping up all over America. Big scores of young white men are attending these mostly white, mostly male gyms, where on the wall there are all these references to all these things. They pray to statues of Jordan Peterson,
Marcus Aurelius.
Yeah, there you go.
Isn't that interesting though? So from the perspective of the media who sides with the Democratic Party, who use wokeness or who are completely similar to that. They have this trigger about fascism, though they are an all-controlling, all-seeing entity. It's just odd that fascism is not used to describe them. It's used to describe everyone who is outside of them.
Well, we won World War II, and who were the people we beat? It was the fascists. So,
Yeah.
I was actually thinking about this. I was thinking about this a lot, about how kind of World War II is sort of the foundational mythology of the world we live in today. And I don't mean mythology as in like it didn't happen. I mean that it informs the mythos of what comes after. Mm-hmm. So kind of, if you take the ancient Greek belief, or I don't even know if it was a sincerely held belief, but the story that they told, like the story that we tell about World War II, the story that was told about how you had these primordial beings that emerged from a conflict with chaos. And then there was this, they had descendants, and their descendants embodied certain aspects of the natural world as well as certain aspects of humanity, like Eros. And how through their intermingling and conflicts and the children that they had, including bizarrely one who was born from someone's penis being thrown into the sea.
She's a doozy too.
She is.
Aphrodite, sorry.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. This kind of this war, this conflict between the Olympians and the Titans, sort of set the tone for kind of the cultural institutions and their outlook on the world, subsequent to that. And I think that World War II played a very similar role, except World War II happened and the Titans and Olympians didn't happen.
Well, no, I mean, the Titans are the nation states, and, fascism and, Germany and Russia and Japan and America, those are the Titans. And then there was kind of a peace on the West and the Iron Curtain too.
Yeah. Metaphorically, that's correct. I'm saying like the ancient Greeks, they founded their civilization on an actual mythology. Whereas our global civilization, is founded on a mythology constructed from something that actually happened.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I would add to World War II also the civil rights. I think that there's a very salient argument about civil rights being our national religion, or the arc in which we perceive progress to happen, at least at the hands of the powers that be, where everything's about a right.
Yeah, I'll agree. There's certainly some very strange, I do get the sense that this country, no disrespect to the man, but I do get the sense that this country has a kind of unhealthy cult of personality about Martin Luther King. Like, not to degrade the man or anything, but I don't think that the degree of adulation that's poured out, I think it's mostly a function of his martyrship than his actual accomplishments. But that's just my opinion.
Well, yeah, but a very powerful character, and even his contradictions, the colorblindness mantra that's now kind of flipped over to color seeingness, but only in certain directions. Like, if you look at the treatment of Clarence Thomas since the Roe v. Wade decision that came out, the liberals or the Democrats have their mask has slipped, and they've done that before with Kanye or anybody who violates what the black person should be for. They will go for racist against.
Yeah, anybody who tries to claim that critical race theory or woke ideology generally is anti-essentialist because of its affiliations to postmodernity, they're mistaken. They're anti-essentialist only in a very surface level when it comes to things like biological essentialism. They're very much committed to moral essentialism. If you belong to group X, then you have political interests Y and must therefore conduct yourself in a manner Z. And if you don't conduct yourself in a manner Z, if you don't express views that are consonant with political ideology Y, then the authenticity of your membership in group X is now legitimately called into question. And this is when ugly smears like Uncle Tom start get thrown around.
Yeah, then that's probably the only one that we can actually pronounce on a podcast together. But
Yeah.
we've both critiqued what we call wokeness, and we see it as, I don't know, it doesn't seem sustainable, but at the same time, it's very sustainable. So if this thing continues, how is another thing going to operate in the shadow of that thing? Is it going to be a regionalization, a federalization of the states, or do you foresee it actually tearing apart the fabric of our states where somehow we're going to have to carve up the country to facilitate these two ways of being, these two ethnicities?
I think that's how it's going to be. I think eventually people are just going to have to come sit at the table and say, okay, look, this isn't working. You know, we had a good run, but at the end of the day, we just have fundamentally different values. So let's talk about how best to allocate resources, talk about the kind of relations that we're going to have in terms of trade and, you know, the military and things like that. And, you know, kind of just move on with our lives as separate nations and, you know, good luck. That's a very optimistic view. I'm definitely not interested in anything like civil war. I think that that's something awful and that needs to be avoided at all costs.
Absolutely, I agree with you. But the left, or at least the media elite, perceive it's their job to enforce their will on everybody else. Right. I mean, there's statements that come up, you know, I don't know why Colbert it's just a propaganda mill, but I guess that's the direction that he chose to go with his career. But he is, you know, facilitating these pronouncements about denouncing half the country and them imposing one law for everyone. It doesn't seem feasible, but it seems like that they're okay with that rhetoric as long as I don't see it playing out good, and I don't see how we create alternative institutions in the shadow of such a totalizing and very full of itself ideology.
Yeah, no, people need to be conscious of what they're doing when they set up these alternative institutions. When we set up the counter-progressive gym club, you know, it has to be understood by everybody attending that we are not about wokeness. We have a separate set of values that we understood, and B, we are not defined by our anti-wokeness. We are not an echo of an echo. We are our own thing. We are something that emerges from something more fundamental.
Okay.
This is positive values.
Yeah, this is the fascinating part. And you already brought up God, but I wonder how people such as yourself, who are very fact-oriented, very anti-symbolism, and people who are more evangelical, let's just say, very symbolism and moral-oriented rather than fact, are going to get along, and they're going to have to get along on some way. There's got to be some sort of compromise that both those subsets come to in order to, you know, carve out a world that they want to live in.
Yeah, and I've been working on another philosophical project, which I'll make a video about at some point, about a kind of God that's available to atheists, rooted in the ideas that were put forward by Spinoza, which constitute more than just a rejection of propositions of the deity. You know, the problem with new atheism was that it was fundamentally defined by the lack of belief in God. It was a negative philosophy. It was an echo. It wasn't its own thing. And this created the epistemological rut that allowed wokeness to ultimately infect it. But if you have a positive conception of atheism, one that isn't rooted in the sort of positive conception that atheism plus ultimately succeeded in inculcating into atheistic institutions, if you have something that's more consonant with the Christian culture in which someone like Spinoza was situated, whilst rejecting the metaphysical aspects of it, but retaining the values,
Hmm.
then you do have room for compromise. But it has to be understood that there's a place for there's a time and place.
For mythology, theology, spirituality, and just basic philosophical value systems that are communicated and shared.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that is not located inside of the science classroom.
Yeah. What are some of, it sounds like this is something it's still in the oven, but what are some of the first principles for that?
Well, the principal value is, contrary to someone like, to the people, to the equitists, contrary to them, they hold equity and diversity and equality and inclusion, at least as they define it, as their highest values. The highest value of the kind of revisionary Spinozism that I'm thinking about would be honesty and curiosity. It would be, I think, all of the ethical attributes of the kind of system that I'm thinking about would follow from our desire to generate the most robust representations of the world possible. This is tying in with my naturalist nuke ideas,
Yeah.
and you wouldn't derive oughts from is, you would you would derive ought from ought. What you ought to do is to develop the best means of arriving at representations of what is, and that same ought makes available a certain type of conduct which is conducive to the kind, it's compatible with the kinds of values that evangelicals, for instance, might be more interested in.
Yeah. So what I'm perceiving is that you can you can kind of bootstrap the good to, not bootstrap, but you can tie the good to the true. And you define what's true, or the process of moving towards the true, and you can see, or you could probably enumerate at some point, how the good is actually shown to facilitate the process of the true.
Yeah, the two are connected. So the good is not derived from the true. The good and the process that arrives at the true issue from the same source.
Which is what the monad is their name?
The monad?
Isn't Spinoza the dude?
He's a monist. Yeah. Yeah. Well, like I said, forthcoming video on the topic. I'm not quite ready. Yeah, okay. I'm not quite ready to commit.
Is that what Billy Idol was singing about? Monet, Monet? Was it like a Spinoza love song?
I don't know. I've never listened to Billy Idol.
Monet, Monet. Well, okay, one more. What about the beautiful?
The beautiful, I'll leave that to everyone's individual sensibilities. I am still at heart a liberal, and I do still believe in the individual. Fundamentally, I do think we all have the capacity to reflect privately and critically upon the good, but we also have the capacity to reflect privately and critically upon the beautiful. And
you said that this is a curious statement, so pardon me prodding or probing. You said that you're still a liberal. That's an interesting statement. What do you mean you're still a liberal?
I mean that in spite of all the shit that I've seen and all of the good arguments that I've heard issued against some of the issues with liberalism, such as the one that Carl Benjamin issued recently on your show, I do think that methodological individualism, or at least something closely approximating it. I'm a methodological naturalist, so my relationship to liberalism is a little bit unorthodox. I do think that there is something about that can still be retained, and that can serve as a fundamental feature of the kind of society and community that I'd like to be a part of.
Lindsay calls it Lindsay calls liberalism a process for resolving disputes. I can see it as some sort of protocol for arriving at compromise without direct force, maybe.
Yeah, yeah. Liberalism's great strength, this might surprise you, I think, is its toleration.
Yeah, well, that's the one thing that I'm always running up against or wary of losing when I look into the alternatives to liberalism, is that where does tolerance fit in? And maybe that's because I've been dogmatized by the liberal media to think that anything that's not liberal is intolerant. But I think tolerance is absolutely essential. And I think that you could, within the matrix that you're proposing or teasing, in approaching the true and developing the good, tolerance is a part of that. And it's I kind of go back to my Christian roots and see tolerance is based on an assumption that everybody comes from the same place and is going to the same place and is under rule ultimately of something that's transcendent. So everybody comes from God, returns to God, however long it takes them, and is potentially connected directly to God, though most of us, for most of our lives, aren't. So every human life is sacred because they derive from the same place. And so that is what I base my tolerance on. I don't know if I necessarily need liberalism for that, but liberalism is a great way of being able to code switch between different cultural methodologies or just different cultures. I can kind of use liberalism to adapt myself, and
That's very interesting. Yeah, my toleration, I guess, teasing a little bit this Spinoza's picture, is derived from an acknowledgement that we are imperfect and that our capacity to apprehend the world is limited, and that we need to be open to exploring alternatives. We need to be able, we need to give ourselves permission to think forbidden things and to, in some instances, butcher our sacred cows, in order to be able to arrive at representations of the world and therefore modes of conduct and solutions to problems, or at least optimal trade-offs to issues. And that if you don't have that, then you're going to inevitably end up with regression and stagnation. If you don't have the mechanisms that are necessary to facilitate exploration and genuine interrogation of what the truth is, then you're going to be stuck in this kind of degrading system.
Yeah. I would addend to curiosity and honesty, humility and gratitude. I know gratitude might be odd to throw in there, but humility is definitely related to what you are talking about. Curiosity is kind of a negative eroticism that needs to begin with, I don't know something. It begins from a desire to fulfill or to venture out into what is unknown. So you have to be humble before your curiosity can be honest. Gratitude, though, is something that kind of makes me lean more towards conservatism, because gratitude would be the assumption that my bodily, let's just use the kind of the abortion or the gender framework that's going on right now, my bodily autonomy derives from it. I didn't start my heart. I don't keep my heart going. It was given to me. My mind, the tools that I use to relate to the world were also given to me. So everything that I call myself is actually inherited, and it's without gratitude towards my source, being my parents, and then the culture that they inculcated in me. Then I think that I'm hobbled with regard to honesty, curiosity, and humility.
Yeah, absolutely. You're part of the great chain of being, as they say. We are situated within our natural communities.
Yeah, and I think there's something intuitively brilliant about your exercise club, because that also, I don't know if it facilitates curiosity so much, but it does facilitate a groundedness in the body, and then a relationship to time and the power that a human being has over their own body and the development that can occur within that. It's very immediate. It's very situated in the body. I think that kind of is a great way to encapsulate the values that you're promoting or wanting to promote, because of just the physical activity and how that affects one's relationship to the body and other people and so on.
Yeah.
Sport is included in that too.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So what were the terms? The proportionalists or
these are shitty terms, so don't feel committed to them at all. But provisionally I'm starting out with proportionists and equitists.
Yeah. And so what are some of the values? I guess we kind of did talk about values, but it seems like we could expand on like the belief or the tenets or the axiomatic principles of the proportionate mindset. And we could probably see them empirically in our world, but would you mind explicating those?
Yeah, but I can only do it to a certain degree. Morality and values, those have never really been my strong suit. Excuse me, my strong suit.
Because you're an evil genius? Is that what you're saying?
No, I am neither evil nor a genius.
No.
I just run my mouth. But I've always been more involved in the epistemological end of it, which is why this dive into the Spinozist, the revisionary Spinozism that I'm thinking about, has been especially challenging but illuminating. Mm-hmm. But provisionally, I can lay out some of the values. There are epistemological values, like I said, and those issue from the same source that other values, I think, can be brought forward. But talking about it descriptively without tying it to any kind of justification, I would just say proportionists, as I mentioned earlier, you get what you give. What you put into society is what you get out of it, or at least is proportional to what you get out of it.
Yeah.
And if there are circumstances that prevent you from being able to, or at least to some degree prevent you from being able to give to society, this is not Ancapistan. We are not. Okay. I am not a Randian objectivist. I'm not interested. You're not going to
put the baby on the rock if it is not viable. Yeah.
Yeah. We don't need to do that, because our community is very much a part of us, just as we are part of the community.
Yeah. That I've been thinking about that. I don't know the correct terminology, but I was thinking, and I think it was either Aaron McIntyre or Sargon, or both of them in conversation with each other, that brought up the difference between civil rights and natural rights. I don't know if those are the terms, but I was thinking about that last night, that I did kind of like a crappy video that I'm not going to publish about it, that the expectation of society giving me a right, giving me housing, giving me roads, giving me all these different things, is kind of what I see when you describe the equitists. And then the responsibility that I have to society, regardless of if I am remunerated, hopefully sufficiently, but over remunerated by it. It's just the other value that I was trying to think of, which would be the right. It's not even a right, it's a responsibility. I can see that plays out with a certain relationship to the community, where it's very tied into, it is a part of me. And I see that the equitists use the community, but they use it on a statistical or on a group level, and it's not as connected as what I perceive is more based on responsibility. I don't know if I'm making sense, because I know there's a lot of really good people that are doing, that are using that framework, social justice framework, to affect the world in the best way that they can see how. And I don't want to, just demonize that whole group, but.
Yeah, no, I really like what you're saying about connecting rights to responsibilities. I don't think there's such a thing as a right that doesn't have corresponding responsibilities. And one of the troubles with um, the equitists is that they want to expand rights, um, but the expansion of responsibilities that inevitably comes with that, that gets offloaded to people who are not necessarily the beneficiaries of those rights.
Name an example.
Um, so let's talk about, for example, the right to reparations, which is something that something that the hard left especially really wants. Reparations for slavery, for Jim Crow, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so we the oppressed underclass, we have a right to these reparations. Why do we have this right? We have this right because this money was effectively stolen from us. This is money that we're entitled to. We deserve it. Um, okay, why do you specifically deserve it? Um, why not your ancestors? Well, my ancestors aren't here anymore. Okay. Well, so that wealth would have been propagated to me and probably accumulated in value over time. Um, but we didn't get that, so that's the reason we're in the position we're in right now. Okay, so whose responsibility is it to cough up? And the answer is everyone who whoever benefits from the exploitation of our ancestors. Okay, well, they're dead too. So what are we going to do about it? Well, we're going to come up with this concept called privilege. And we're going to assign this concept to every living white person. And we're going to say that because they benefit from white privilege in some abstract sense, you can go your entire life being miserable and being treated like shit as a white person, but you'll still have white privilege. Mm-hmm. And this white privilege is the kind of the missing link. It's the justification for this kind of redistributive policy. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So,
and it has an excellent capacity to enforce a moral reparation too, especially for people who are given to over rely on empathy. Can be gamed by that. Yeah.
I don't have answers to these questions. I don't have solutions to these problems. Mm-hmm. I really function best as a negative philosopher. I'm really good at taking apart bad ideas and showing where like analysis of data is bad. But when it comes to constructing something, like I can do it if I really set my mind to it, and if I really, but it's much more difficult for me to build good ideas than it is for me to tear down bad ideas.
Have you? It's an interesting arc because I don't know your entire history. Well, I don't know your entire history, but your arc of communication, specifically through YouTube, you were very heavily critiquing Christianity and then wokeness. And so it's just interesting to see that. Well, how do you feel about kind of having to say, well, actually Christianity is better than this other thing? And is there kind of an arc going on, and how's that been?
Well, I would say that the bulk of my criticisms have actually been against creationism. Mm-hmm. There have been very early, very shitty videos where I kind of did like biblical parodies, but I would say that was more me trying to like explore the YouTube space and fill a niche. Yeah. I really came into my own and had my own voice instead of borrowing other people's voices when I started going after creationism, and not just going after creationism, qua creationism. It's like, oh, it's such an easy target. It's such low hanging fruit. Why do you waste time going after creationists when you could be making videos teaching the basics of quantum mechanics, which I did that too. Mm-hmm. And the answer is it was always teaching science. I just used creationism as as a foil. When I explain why somebody like Kent Hovind is wrong about his belief that the speed of light is changing, it's necessary. I'm not satisfied with just doing the debunking thing where you go onto some website and you reiterate whatever they say. I want people to understand why it is the case that the speed of light changing over time has consequences for the actual structure of the universe itself. And that requires some explanation of the relationship between group velocity and phase velocity and the speed of light and the permittivity and permeability constants. And people learn physics through this. I bait them with a debunking video, and I trick them into learning physics. Mm-hmm. And I've kind of had a similar approach with wokeness, except more oriented towards the philosophy of science.
Yeah, yeah, and not facticity. I don't know why that word popped in my brain, but your relationship, especially, and we have to plug it again, because it's brilliant. It's 4 parts or 5 parts. The Naturalist nuke. It's a brilliant bit of. I don't want to say polemic or rhetoric because there's actual substance in there, but that's a great series that goes through that. So that's an interesting point because in my own trajectory on YouTube, it was very critiquing the woke. It was anti-woke. And then I kind of said, well, I don't feel satisfied. I actually feel very anxious by being just a negative Nancy, and it's not, I guess you said I was looking for my own voice. Using wokeness or using, let's say, the failures of the consequences of gender ideology to kind of try to point back to something else. What I tend to try to end up pointing back to is the basic human experience, the lived experience, or whatever that's called, that human biographical experience, and how morality is good. Morality leads us towards being broader or wider or more ourselves, and negative morality makes us more depressed and inverted and prone to negative experiences. So
it's important to have positive values, and I hope to provide those with my forthcoming views on Spinoza.
Yeah. So it is interesting to not just, just what you were saying about creationism and your critiques of wokeness are always teaching science. And I hope that I too, insofar as I have to be anti-woke or have been anti-woke, I've been providing something positive. And I think that is kind of the road toward, well, one, getting people on your page because people love to watch train wrecks and teardowns and stuff like that, but also to send them forth with something positive. And I think that, I don't know how these new institutions begin to operate, but they do have to kind of launch off from the anti-woke or the negative kind of critique into some sort of positive thing. And watching how that might happen is interesting, but it's kind of below the surface because everything that gets attention is that which owns the libs or conversely owns the cons, right? So
yeah, you have to trick people into getting substance.
Yeah, you do. You have to ease them into your movie theater with the promise of infinite butter, but then also give them something that's better than butter. I don't know what that would be, but just to make a silly metaphor. So what next then? You're building these arguments and stuff, but
yeah. So I've been off YouTube for a while, and I don't expect to upload quite as regularly as I did when I was still in school. Mm-hmm. I've got a proper job now. I have responsibilities, and I'll be trying to reach out to a more general audience with kind of general physics videos and biomedical physics videos.
Oh, wow. Okay. Like catheter insertion instructions, stuff like that?
I actually
own toenails.
I actually saw a catheter insertion procedure taking place.
Just like today when you're
a couple days ago.
Okay, cool.
I'm often in a hospital environment for work, but yeah, that could definitely be part of it. Talking about the physics of fluoroscopy, things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. Are you? Do you think that there is a kind of a community, or not to name it something like IDW or something, but like a argumentative or a discursive community in the virtual space that you see is going in the right direction, or individual content creators or even thinkers out there that
I have ambitions to create one. I've provisionally named it the Online Naturalist Community. Um, you can still join as an honorary Christian member if you want, Ben.
I don't even know if I'm Christian yet, but as long as there's some touching of grass,
Yeah, don't worry. Yeah, but this community will be less oriented on the normative end and more oriented on the epistemological end, and that's kind of the epistemological arguments are going to be a combination of positive and negative philosophy. These epistemological frameworks are bad, but here's one that actually produces results that are favorable. Whereas the normative aspect has to be purely positive. But again, forthcoming content on that.
And by saying positive, you mean
You're not
stuff.
just deconstructing other people's normative systems. You're building one of your own.
Mm-hmm.
It's not enough to say SJWs don't respect the individual. You need to provide an account for why and in what ways the individual matters.
Yeah.
And it has to not have kind of loopholes in it that allow for people to run amok and start doing things you don't want them to do with it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Idiot-proof philosophy. Good luck with that. Have you engaged with have you done something like a Discord server or something like that and kind of tried to lead a community?
I do have a Discord server, but it's highly exclusive at this time.
Oh, cool. Okay.
Yeah, nothing goes on in there, to be honest.
Mm-hmm.
I talk to people, I share ideas, and they share their ideas, but it's nothing like a proper, larger naturalist community. That's something that I need to put more time and thought into before I'm prepared to, present it to the world.
Yeah, there's something that is very heartening about the arc, the arc of Carl Benjamin's moral universe, where he started critiquing Gamergate and, did a bunch of things that got him a lot of attention and went in a completely unexpected direction with Lotus Eaters, where now it's just kind of this boarding school in the sky kind of thing, where he's got historians and academics, and they're building something and they're creating content that is of a different level of intensity than that YouTube space. And I just think that that's really interesting how he went in that direction. And I can see how somebody with your skill set, and especially because it appears that you've interacted with schools, could follow that same kind of direction and get in contact or work in conjunction with people who want to kind of pivot from the critic toward the educative content creation. And I think that is a very powerful direction to go, especially later on down the road when accreditation is no longer the purview of the governing body as it is, but can be distributed broadly.
Absolutely. Yeah. I have worked with Sargon in that capacity before. We have had extended conversations about these things. Mm-hmm. We haven't done anything together recently, but I hope he watches this video and maybe he'll reach out to me and ask my opinion on something, or ask for, because I have ideas that I'd like to share, and I do think I can act in a kind of consulting capacity. On
what level, like bringing naturalism into different debates, or expanding certain discourses, methodological.
Both. Providing a kind of connective tissue. So Sargon in his conversation with you brought up some of the ambiguities and open-ended features of his ideology that he's not entirely sure about, and which I think the kind of naturalistic framework I'm putting forward might be able to have answers to.
So could you, without blowing my brain too hard, just kind of like give me what naturalism is, or give the audience just lodge it in your head about what that is?
Sure. So naturalism, I would say, is fundamentally about my desire to have my beliefs about the world accountable to my senses. And the way I formulate naturalism is as a metaphilosophical approach. So it's it's a characterization of the relationship between philosophy and science. And the way I conceive of it is philosophy and science are continuous with one another and mutually reinforcing. The analytic and introspective aspects that we typically associate with philosophy are not the exclusive purview of philosophers. Scientists engage in it too. And empirical inquiry is not the exclusive purview of scientists. Philosophers who, care about interacting with the world outside of their armchairs. There are some armchair philosophers who want to live off in their little world of forms and who don't want to, engage with the world. Them I don't care about. The kinds of philosophers I'm interested in, the kinds who are used to a naturalistic framework, are the ones who are prepared to engage with the world and who are prepared to use whatever the scientists learn to revise their concepts and then feed that back to the scientists for them to, test and do their whole empirical thing with. So naturalism, as I conceive of it, is characterized by that relationship. In contrast to anti-naturalist approaches, which place a philosophical foundation, and they'll tell the story about how, philosophy came first. First, there were the pre-Socratics, there were Thales and Heraclitus and Parmenides. I'm butchering their names, but I know who I'm talking about. You know who I'm talking about. Everyone knows who I'm talking about. and then along comes Socrates and Plato and Aristotle, and then come all these other guys. Bertrand Russell's History of Western Philosophy, basically, and then finally, we get at the beginning of the Enlightenment, Francis Bacon, and at this one discrete moment in time when he writes the Novum Organum, now suddenly science is born, and philosophers have thus begotten science, and so science is founded upon philosophical foundations. I think that view is bullshit for reasons I go into in the Nuking Social Constructionism series. And my rejection of that view and embracing of the former view of a mutually interactive, interdisciplinary approach is what sort of informs everything that I do in relation to those activities.
I can see the glimmer in my head. I have a glimmer of being able to reduce your naturalism. I almost called it an ideology. Sorry, I don't mean that in a negative sense, but into kind of a parable or a kid's story of just following this character. Like they wake up in the morning, or they're drinking their coffee or their juice, and something's going on in their head. What's going on in their head? And then they go out into the world and something happens with their body or with their senses. And then they go back into the head, and just kind of exploring the relationship of what's going on in the head and what's going on with the body and how those things are linked could really be distilled into a parable that would then form the foundation of at least some sort of educational system from, kindergarten up to science-worthy doctorate degrees.
Yeah, someone with more imagination than I will have to engage in it. So feel free to write a musical about that.
Okay, I'm a scientist. But what are kind of the mechanisms of thought that inform this naturalism? Like, what is it hypothesis or rigor or math? Or
basically there are four criteria that I've identified as being sort of the criteria by which we ought to judge our beliefs. And the reason, it's something that everybody does to some degree, whether they realize it or not. And I go over the reasons for that in the series that I keep on plugging.
Gotta keep on plugging it.
Yeah. But those four criteria, or the big four as I call them, are predictive accuracy and precision, explanatory efficiency, optimal flexibility, and rational coherence. And it's my assertion that when we judge our beliefs, the quality of our beliefs by these four criteria, this is how we arrive at representations of the world that allow us to produce, I'm speaking in circles. They allow us to produce representations of the world that have the greatest degree of fidelity. They allow us to achieve certain goals that are not situated within our tribes or within our cultures or our time and place in history. These goals are natural. These goals are more ancient. We're all, whatever our cultures, whatever our societies or civilizations, we're all similarly situated living organisms who are interested in postponing our deaths.
Mm-hmm.
And when I say our deaths, that doesn't necessarily mean that I don't necessarily mean that in the individual sense. Multi-level selection is a thing. The deaths of groups and communities is also of some importance here.
The driving force, yeah.
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 And yeah, we should, we've developed over the course of our natural history, these cognitive modalities that allow us to develop representations of the world that satisfy these criteria to some degree. And, to the extent that these criteria are satisfied, our fitness, I claim, also improves. And, I think that insofar as we consider it a moral good to postpone our deaths and the deaths of those we love, it's a moral good to develop representations of the world that satisfy these criteria to a greater degree.
Mm-hmm. And it just seems like human beings, it seems like the exertive force or the feedback loop of the editing mechanism of reality, or what we call death, or the finitude, is padded by our technology. It seems that a lot of the bad ideas that happen is because there's not that feedback loop between, death, let's just say, or despair, depravity, by which I mean just material depravity, and the consequences. When human beings move away from having to deal with the consequences of their actions, that's when the more monstrous ideas or the more fantastical kind of suppositions begin to breed.
There has to be skin in the game. At some point, the rubber is going to hit the road. And, that's something that you have to be cognizant of. Otherwise, you're not actually developing models that are maximally representative or that are maximally constrained by these four criteria.
So is there like a juicy little thing that I can get out of you that won't dox you, like some hidden talent that you have, like you've memorized like the book of Numbers or something really, just some hidden talent of yours, an obscure instrument or something?
I mean,
is there Crockoduck trivia?
I know quite a bit about biomedical physics,
okay.
But that's not a terribly hidden talent. Everyone kind of knows what I'm about.
Oh, okay. Do you have dreams about like these weird skeletal or biological beings and their systems? Like you could just like see them inside and out and stuff, like those China people that were plasticized?
I don't need to dream. I see it every day.
You see it every day. Just shove a catheter in that one.
Or better yet, low dose rate brachytherapy.
Oh, geez, what's that? Low dose ray cathode therapy?
Brachytherapy. So basically, somebody has prostate cancer. You take radioactive seeds, you stick them inside of a long kind of tube, and you stick it up a guy's ass, and you plant these radioactive seeds inside of the cancerous prostate. And the idea is these radioactive seeds are going to decay while they're inside of him, and you leave them inside of him. He goes home. Yeah. And the radiation, comes out. You don't want kids sitting on his lap, obviously, for the first few days. Yeah. But, it's basically like, with external beam radiotherapy, you're firing a cannon. You're aiming this laser of high energy electrons or X-rays, or if you're super rich, protons at a tumorous mass. But with brachytherapy, it's more like planting a bomb. You're placing the sources of radiation inside of the person, and hopefully that controls the tumor.
And it destroys the flesh around the seed, and then the seed kind of just naturally decays and is flushed away.
Yeah. Yeah. And of course, as with all radiotherapy, or almost all radiotherapy, some amount of healthy tissue is going to be damaged. Yeah. That's just the name of the game.
Oh, wow. What are these seeds made out of?
So they can be very there
It's
are
a metal, I guess.
various radioisotopes that are used for this. Um,
Huh.
yeah, the one that I've seen used the most often is iodine 123. Um,
Is that a? I guess that's an isotope, but how does it take material shape? Is there just like kind of it's in a capsule? It's like this highly radioactive element that's in a capsule, and then the radiation just kind of goes through the capsule
Sorry,
into
did I say
tissue.
iodine 123? I meant 125. I'm
Okay,
done.
is that a big difference? 125,
Um,
123, two isotopes.
I think 123 might be used in nuclear reactors. I could be
Oh, okay.
wrong.
All right.
Yeah,
Well,
don't quote me on this. I've or is it 123? Damn, I
only
can never remember. I done 125 or 123, and I'm confusing myself. I'm a bad physicist. Uh,
what's a
but
couple of numbers? I'm sure that doesn't make a terrible bit of difference.
yeah, one of these you're planting a nuclear reactor inside of the person, and the other one you're just treating their cancer.
Yeah, you're just going. Okay, yeah. Do you have any hopes for, I guess, the rest of this year? Do you have anything coming out? We spoke about what you're designing, but is there do you have kind of a date there when you think it'll be ready?
Yeah, and as I was saying, I don't want to make any promises I can't keep. I always say 2 weeks, 2 weeks, 2 weeks. It ends up being like 6 months.
Oh, wow.
It's
Okay.
it's not going to be 6 months this time. Uh, I do plan to allocate more time to YouTube, but I got other stuff going on too.
Have you gone in the direction of writing much? Like
Um,
Substacking or something like that? Blogging?
I, I do have a Medium, but I never use it.
Yeah, okay. Is that
I
your
I,
calling?
I mean, I've been writing some short creative stories, but
Oh, really?
I'm not really ready to release them. There's
Okay.
there's one I there's one that I wrote called The Kindness Industry, which is kind of
Hmm.
a parody or a satire of the times we live in,
Hmm.
and it's about this kind of consultant who was hired by a firm to come in and exercise her tyranny, um, and use doublespeak in a kind of comedic but terrifying way. And it's utter trash. I'm a complete hack, but maybe if you're nice to me, Ben, I'll let you read it by yourself.
Oh, yeah, please send it over. Send it
Yeah.
over. I think we should wrap up the recording portion of our
Yes.
talk. So
Yes. I'm sorry about the internet situation, but in
I'll
my
clean it
defense,
up in post.
there was a lot of sunspot activity lately.
Oh,
So
has there been?
supposedly
Are you serious?
there have been a bunch of storms, solar storms.
Okay. Is
Nothing
that
to worry about.
okay? Is it God's wrath for Roe v. Wade being overturned? Do we know that yet? We have to wait.
Probably.
Is there
Probably.
messages written in the sun about our direction as a
Yeah.
society?
Yeah. That's exactly how it works.
Okay. Well, you would know all the particle beams that you've analyzed in your time on Earth.
I don't think I've ever worked with a source quite as energetic as the sun, but yeah.
Someday, someday you might get there. We,
Yeah.
we need some cold fusion if that's
Finger,
the thing, right?
oof, fingers crossed.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Any parting gifts of wisdom to the audience?
Wisdom.
Hmm.
I could use some myself.
Mm.
Yeah, I don't know if I have any to spare today.
No, that's fine.
I
That's
guess
fine.
I'll see you in the comments section and subscribe to me, you dickless cucks.
That's okay. That's how we have to end. I'm gonna stop the recording.